Do the trashy pulp novels of the world have anything to offer? Are bestsellers all they're cracked up to be? Here at Terrible Book Club, we explore whether you really can judge a book by its cover, or its ridiculous synopsis. You ever passed a book and thought, ugh, who's reading this? We probably are.
Hello and welcome to episode 193 of the Terrible Book Club. That number is getting so close to 200. I'm Paris, and this is Chris.
It's alarming. Hello.
Every time the number goes up, I just can't believe I'm still saying the numbers and they continue to go up.
Yes, I agree.
All right, this time we read Mogworld by Yahtzee Croshaw, originally published in 2010 and republished in 2018, which is the version we read. This was requested by our patron of the Void, the taco-eating unicorn. You may notice that this is the second Yahtzee book that said unicorn has requested, in the hopes that we would enjoy it more than their previous request, which was Yahtzee's 2012 book, Jam. So because of this patron, we have now read 2 Yahtzee Croshaw books in about a year, and I'm not really sure how to feel about it. Love you, of the Void, the taco-eating unicorn, though. No shade. We're just not into this. I'm just going to say that right out the gate.
Yeah, we wouldn't have read it
yeah.
if you had not suggested it.
No, but I guess I am actually kind of glad that I've read this stuff because, you know, as a nerd and somebody who plays video games, I'm still kind of on the outskirts of that culture. I'm way off in...
That's fine.
Yeah, like I am...
Stay out there. There's nothing good in here.
But it's good to get a glimpse into the deeper, darker heart of the deep nerds. You know,
that's actually like they're pale and they're in a cave and they just, like, if you shine a light on them, they hiss and run away. That is basically what they do.
It's like the albinos in this story, actually, that live in the sewer. It's kind of like that. Anyway, if this is your first time listening to this show, what we do here at the Terrible Book Club is read books that we assume will be bad based on their cover, title, summary, or some combination of the three. Sometimes, like today, we read books that our patrons, listeners, or friends recommend. So we do the opposite of what most people do when they are in a bookstore or while they're browsing the internet and looking for something to read. Typically, this experiment results in a hilariously disappointing read, but once in a while, we actually do end up liking or even loving the book on occasion. Today's show includes our usual barnyard language, as ever, and we've also got some misogyny, a far too long form joke about sexual assault, and we unfortunately just got to talk about, like, authors throwing around the R word real casually in media in the 2010s. I don't know. Unfortunately, a thing we have to discuss today. So that's what we got going on. Chris, why don't you read the back of the book summary and tell us how Mr. Yahtzee here was trying to pull us into Mogworld.
Got it. In a world full to bursting with would-be heroes, Jim couldn't be less interested in saving the day. His fireballs fizzle, he's awfully grumpy. Plus, he's been dead for about 60 years, when a renegade necromancer wrenches him from eternal slumber and into a world gone terribly, bizarrely wrong. All Jim wants is to find a way to die properly, once and for all. On his side, he's got a few shambling corpses, an inept thief, and a powerful death wish. But he's up against tough odds, angry mobs of adventurers, a body falling apart at the seams, and a team of programmers racing a deadline to hammer out the last few bugs in their AI.
Thank you, Chris.
Okay. I'm also going to give you the characters and setting here. So obviously our setting is Mogworld, a place which is revealed to be a video game about 1/3 of the way through the book. It gets a little obvious.
Or just when you read the title and you knew immediately,
yes.
Which is what happened to me.
Yeah. Also, it's not really that well hidden or anything,
no.
but, you know. I guess if you're really out of touch with video games, you might not have guessed it until it was explicitly said. Like, if you don't know what a T-pose is, that clue might have gone by over your head there.
Or what MOG might stand for, you know.
Yes. Yeah, exactly.
Which, Chris, could you enlighten the people? Because I think a lot of people listen to this actually aren't deep nerds.
Good point. It's basically for massively online game.
Yeah, or massive online game, massively online game, whatever.
Yeah.
There's you probably have seen MMORPG, massive MO.
Yes.
Yeah.
Massively multiplayer online RPGs.
Yes. MMORPG. Thank you. The letters are hard. This is our second recording of the day, and I am still unhinged, so the struggle is real. Thanks, Chris. You can continue.
Okay, so that was our setting. Then we've got some characters like Jim, who is mentioned in the back of the book summary there. He's our protagonist, recently raised from the dead and really hating it. You got Meryl, sort of what I would call a ditzy follower or companion to Jim that kind of just like goes along with him for the journey. You got Thaddeus, an undead zealot who is also hating it. He hates the concept of undead, and he thinks that they're an abomination. So when he is one, that's kind of a problem.
Real D from Elden Ring energy in that guy.
Yes, exactly. Then you've got Barry, a resurrection vicar who becomes nearly unkillable due to programmer favoritism. You have Slippery John, the rogue/rapist multi-class, who refers to himself in the third person the entire time. You've got Mr. Wonderful and Bogue, Adventurer Guild enforcers who show up to threaten Jim and pals into doing things sometimes, who I left out of the summary that I wrote because, like, they barely matter.
They don't matter at all. Also, I'm really glad, though, that, Chris, we finally united in pronunciation. I was like... Fuck, Chris is gonna call, because I was like, oh, it's Bogue, and I was like, Chris is gonna see this and call it Baug, and we were gonna fight, but no, you chose correctly. You chose Bogue.
Sometimes. Okay, then we've got Simon, the idiot programmer that messes everything up. You've got Bub, the annoyed programmer who's tired of dealing with Simon's shit. There's a third programmer that's just there to be in chat rooms.
His name's actually Dubs, but that's all right.
Oh. I thought it was Bub.
It's Dubs.
I don't know what it is.
Dubs.
I was thinking because Wolverine from the last book, so I had Bub on the
yeah,
mind.
you got muddled there a little bit, but that's all right.
Just replace all the Bubs with Dubs here. So there's going to be a Bub in the summary there. You should replace it.
No, I already did that. I already saved us from ourselves.
Okay, thank you. And then you've got various other characters living within Mogworld, such as Dreadgrave, the necromancer, who's the one that revives Jim. Adventurers and NPCs and various religions and their adherents, video game stuff. Okay, Paris, why don't you read the summary that I wrote for our listeners here? We do this so that you don't feel as if you have to read this book to follow along with our discussion. You have some reference point for what the heck we're talking about here. This book was 400 pages. Just about, so I had to kind of gloss over some things.
Ask me why I was keeping count, because I had to read this in a couple hours, and it was rough.
Yeah, really trying to do a top-level summary over here, so we're not going to touch on every last bit of thing that happens in here. But, Paris, whenever you're ready, you can take it away.
All right. It's rough for Jim here at Magic School because he's immediately fucking killed when the rival warrior school decides to invade as like kind of a frat prank or something. He wakes up 50 years later as an undead minion of Dreadgrave, a necromancer, who's actually kind of a cool boss. His assistant, Meryl, another undead, seems to take a liking to Jim since they were from the same village in life. Jim takes a liking to trying to die, since when he originally died, there was a bright light that seemed inviting and warm, but now there's just these weird white angel things that pop up whenever Jim dies again, shortly before he is resurrected. Turns out that the undead aren't the only people resurrecting. In fact, everyone can be resurrected, and no one has truly died in 15 years. Dreadgrave is the first person since then, to do your sort of bog standard corpse resurrection that sticks and not a you're actually just regular alive again resurrection. Too bad he and his castle got literally erased from existence by those white angels Jim saw in the Death World who can, I guess, just delete you so you're never resurrected. So Jim calls them deleters and he really wants to find them again so he can be removed from this immortal coil. Jim and Meryl are the only survivors of the deletion of Dreadgrave and his entire army, as well as Thaddeus, an undead priest full of self-hatred and general hatred of the undead. Slippery John, a rogue, is also here and annoying and weird and obsessed with a woman who is vegetative. And that's the long-form joke we were talking about earlier. It's real rough. The crew encounter Barry, a vicar who handles resurrections that's a little bit annoyed all the time. Jim and company annoy him enough by accidentally destroying his chapel, so Barry imprisons them and trundles them off to a nearby town for a good old-fashioned undead burning party. Except the people in the town kind of like Jim and Meryl and all the undead since, you know, the whole undead attack and rebuilding of the village thing became kind of a fun routine since no one could really die. And, you know, they're all just like peasant farmers, so it's like the one point of fun they get in their week. Barry and his followers get in a fight with the townsfolk as a result, giving Jim and Meryl and Thaddeus an opportunity to escape. They do, and Jim decides he wants to find Slippery John again since he had said something about a magic resistance, who are a group that want to figure out how to undo the whole no one can die thing, and maybe give Jim a peaceful death, or at least lead him to more deleters so he can be deleted. Jim has also experienced other strange things, namely, whenever he interacts with certain things, he causes weird effects, like, say, an adventurer who has been taken over by the syndrome, which is a disease in which an adventurer becomes robot-like or even catatonic. He also begins to tap into some kind of communication between the deleters, which turns out are just chat logs and emails, and this is all a video game! Jim isn't aware of that yet, of course, but we, the readers, pick up on that fairly quickly. Turns out there's a game company that has been working on procedurally generating everything in a game, including the NPCs, like Jim. The whole no-death thing is, you know, them turning off death so people can replay the game and, like, don't have to worry about accidentally killing NPCs and all that. But, of course, they don't realize that their NPCs and everything in the game is actually sentient and has come to true life. Except maybe Simon, one programmer who doesn't do any work but loves playing with Barry, his new favorite character. Simon gives Barry unreasonably high-level stats and spells so Simon can control the NPCs and players within the game, while another programmer, Dubs, tries to get Simon fired while also fixing all the bugs that keep popping up. Jim, Meryl, and Thaddeus get to Lolede City, where Jim immediately crashes the economy by not understanding the relationship between money and quest points, and freely gives away 100 points for the quest of giving him 50 gold. This makes every adventurer not want to do the kill the monsters for points quest. They are, of course, imprisoned for this disruption, but are immediately given like 4 escape routes by various parties, which eventually lead them to the magic resistance, led by the big evil boss, Baron Sivius of the Malevolans, and his wife, Mrs. Sivius, also of the Malevolans. Assumedly. Sivius has some theories on why the whole no-death thing is happening, but that's interrupted by Barry rolling into town and essentially taking over with his absurd power levels. Barry destroys Mr. and Mrs. Sivius with a giant laser spell, but not before Jim learns that he must head to Mount Murder Cruel, the center of deleter activity. With Barry on their tail and an entire upset adventurers guild, Jim heads to the mountain. He also finally learns the truth of his world by coming into contact with Dubs, as well as the fact that Jim's touch is essentially a glitch inducer with the power to corrupt certain game functions it comes into contact with. Jim gets to the top of the mountain, finds the deleter control room, which is just a command console. With Dub's guidance, he uses his corrupting touch and access to the deleters in the dead world to corrupt Barry and the whole damn world. Everything is completely gone. Eventually it is restored from an earlier backup on the server, and Jim starts all over again at magic school, except Jim isn't immediately killed because Dubs wanted to reward him for helping him fix everything and get Simon fired. Ta-da!
The end. I think that's a pretty decent summary, actually, considering all the other nonsense that happens.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot that happens. There's the 2 characters that we didn't even talk about, Mr. Wonderful and Bogue. I can't tell you what their point or purpose was in the story. They seemed completely superfluous.
They're from the Adventurers Guild who got all upset because Jim crashed the quest point economy, and Mr. Wonderful is kind of just a psychopath that wants to see things suffer, so he does a lot of like knife stuff and threatens Jim and Meryl and Thaddeus
he's just
into
a drow,
doing
right?
stuff so that
Like, he's just an evil elf.
Yeah.
Right? That's the whole thing. It's his whole shtick.
Essentially, yes. That's really it.
All right. So, anyway, let's talk about technical construction, Chris. Do we have anything to say about typos or formatting or punctuation? Are we good?
I got nothing on this one. This is another just like, hey man, he can definitely write a book. You know, all the editing stuff is fine.
I feel like it could definitely use some content editing, but in terms of like sentence to sentence, dialogue, everything, it was totally fine. Like, no typos, formatted great, punctuation was great, like no issues, clearly professionally done. It was easy to read, which I was grateful for considering the time crunch I was in to finish this, given my last couple weeks on this earth that I hope is not a video game. So yeah, I feel like technical construction is just Sir not appearing in this podcast episode today, and we can just continue on to plot and characters.
Yep, easy one.
Yeah.
We just move
Good
on
work.
into plot and characters here. So as far as coherence, I mean, taking the premise as a given, it's okay enough in terms of that. We can suspend our disbelief about like no death and all that kind of fun stuff because it's literally a video game and you can just go, okay, well, they changed the code and video gamey stuff can happen, right? So that aspect of it is fine.
I think it's honestly, a perfect setting for a fantasy world because you're like, oh, I can accept that this is actually happening because games like this exist and I have some concept of this, whether you are a deep nerd and you play video games or you're a programmer yourself, or even if you're just a casual player or person who exists in the world, you probably understand that video games work in this way, right? So I think this is actually a better premise than a lot of other things we've read because it is so believable in a way, right? Because you can find there is some grounding here. You have built a solid foundation. I just feel like that it kind of has a pretty solid place to start, which is more than we get with a lot of things we've read for the show.
Yeah. In addition, sort of Jim's quest throughout this being, I want to actually just be dead, please, is a pretty good one. You know, that kind of makes sense. Although the way his motivations sort of shift over time makes a little bit less sense to me. And sort of like how he thinks originally in the beginning, he just forgets to get the deleters to delete him because he watches the whole castle get erased from existence and he's hiding. And then Meryl's like, didn't you want to die? That would have been a good opportunity for that. And he's like, oh, fuck, that's right. Come back. And like the whole rest of the book is him trying to get that to happen instead.
Well, I think it's because he, initially he just wants to die because he's like, what do I have to live for? But then as he sort of develops his moral compass and makes friends begrudgingly, he sort of realizes that, I don't know, maybe being alive isn't so bad, and he fights with himself because, of course, there is responsibility with being alive, right? Which he absolutely does not want. Like, Jim is very much...
No, he doesn't at all.
So, I understand that, life is tough. So that's the whole struggle. And, it's not a bad framing for a main character. I'd much rather that than hero number 784 is trying to save maiden number 542 again,
Yeah, he's doing like accidental heroic protagonist stuff just because he's trying to just get deleted, essentially.
Yeah, so again, not my favorite, but I did appreciate that and thought it was a little different than most of the stuff we've had to read for the show. So for base level coherence, I felt like I was with it until about the midpoint, which is when all of a sudden Jim can read emails and DMs from the employees at the game studio. And I was like, hold the fuck on. That makes no sense. I was like, how on earth would something in the game engine have access to emails and DMs I didn't
yeah, like
get
how does he
that.
get outside of the build? Like I guess you're supposed to be like, oh
understand.
well, like the computer that's running the instance of the game, he can like reach outside the boundaries of that instance of the game onto that particular workstation to
I
read
don't know.
chat. Although it's never it like said what workstation he's on, and like email servers and chat servers are like completely different machines from like the ones that would be running the actual game instance, I would assume.
I was really having trouble with like how would an entity or like an object in a game engine be able to reach outside of it and interact with things in other programs, and that was the part where I was like, I don't follow. I don't think that makes any sense.
I'm sure there's some like mobile game out there that like adds spyware to your system, right? Like that's definitely a thing that happens. So it's not an impossibility.
You know what? You're not wrong. Maybe.
Wait, Jim is literally spyware.
He's the Trojan horse. He is the
chat
wooden
logs.
horse that he's called on a page of
Yes.
this. Oh my god. Yeah, maybe this game studio is just sending out games. Yeah, maybe you're right. Maybe it's just devious like that. I guess I could buy, it's not it's certainly not spelled out in the book at all, but that I could understand.
Yeah, he's not compelled. I mean, he's compelled by like trying to figure out what he's even reading, like that aspect, but it's not like he has like virus code to reach out there. Like, no. So what got added to him, because it's not, he got raised from the dead and that was enough to be the corrupting influence on the game code. Cause it's like, he goes to the dead world just like everyone else does, assumedly. So, like, it's not like there's something special about Jim being undead and being resurrected.
Well, they were saying it was...
So, why is his touch in particular...
Well, him, Meryl, and Thaddeus are the three people who are left from, Grave fucker, what was his name? Dreadgrave. They were the only three left, and it was all of Dreadgrave's resurrections that were the problem. They thought they had gotten rid of them by sending the... the mod deleting angels to like delete the whole fortress and everyone, but they missed those three because they weren't at the fortress at the time. So theoretically, Thaddeus and Meryl also have these abilities, but they haven't died again. So I think what happened is he, became undead in this particular way that was a danger to the game, and then he died many more times, and it seemed like maybe with each successive death, it corrupted the code more and more or something. That was what I was getting
like
at.
His own internal code to be able to like access, like, how can you corrupt code enough that it gains entry into these other ports, right? Like, you have to corrupt it in such a way that it gains a function.
Well, you can corrupt... you can corrupt things in a way that certainly breaks like glass spidering forth, where you're like, how could this possibly cause problems here? And then you're like, oh no. Oh no. Oh no. So I understand that sort of fractured breakage where, you think you just have a bug in one part of the code and then it ends up causing more problems because of the way it interacts with other parts of what you've designed. But yeah, it's a little shaky, but I still think it's a better and more deeply thought out than 90% of the things we've read for the show.
Yes. I will still agree on that one in terms of coherence. We complain all the time about, especially when we're talking about fantasy, about like, what's your magic system? How does any of this work? Why would you just got to connect some dots. I just need a little something when it comes to sci-fi fantasy. Obviously real world stuff, but that's a little easier because, most of the time we understand how regular reality works. Not always, but, I just need a little something. I need you to come up with something that's believable based on what we understand of the possibilities of physics or even potential possibilities, right? Like something that follows from current knowledge. I feel like that's what helps me get more immersed in something. And so for this, I'm like, all right, I'm kind of with you. I think, Chris, your explanation of the game just coming with like Trojan horse software or spyware is like a great explanation of why of how the in-game objects could actually reach out into other things on the same system. The disconnect for me is, how does the NPC within the game code become the spyware accidentally. Right? Like that's sort of the leap
that
I'm having
is
trouble
a
with.
little weird. I mean, but I'm not a programmer, so we would have to get.
I've taken some very basic coding stuff, so like my understanding of like how that could maybe happen is
my
very,
understanding.
Very thin.
I say I'm not a programmer because the only language I even know I know SQL, and then I know a little bit of Python, and Python isn't real. We all know that's not. that's like baby language, so I can't say that I.
Yeah.
And I barely have to use it. So I live in databases, my friends. I live in rows and columns, and the logic therein. That's what I love. But this shit is beyond me. I'm too dumb for this. So I don't know if anyone listens to this and is perhaps creates video games or is a programmer. Please enlighten us. Tell us if this makes any sense. We're doing some acrobatics. It kind of works for us, I think.
To the broader point of like the coherence of the plot and the motivations of people is relatively, we're just going to say that's totally fine and maybe a little bit interesting.
I think the only I feel like the only time I was a little frustrated is when we started to layer up all of these different competing people and societies, and I was like, this book does not need to be 414 pages. We didn't need Mr. Wonderful and Bogue. We didn't need... Honestly, I didn't even really... Like, you could have picked one. You could have had Thaddeus or Barry. I didn't understand why we need both of them.
You really could have melded them together.
The whole Mr. Evil bad guy and his wife, they just get murdered anyway, so they didn't match. I don't know. There's just a lot of stuff that I was like, this really could have been tightened up and it would have been a lot better as a result. Part of my pain with this whole plot was how fucking long it went on.
It's the pacing that hurts, right? Like it's just a little bit too much. And this is kind of reaching into the characters aspect here, or the
That's okay, we can do that. We've become spyware. We can reach into other baskets in this review.
Yes, exactly. That's true. So, like, at the start of the book, I was actually kind of having a good time with Jim. He's sarcastic. He's annoyed all the time. And I can take a little bit of that. That could be funny. But around the midpoint, I just started to find him to be kind of a jerk and mean instead of like, haha, he's like, this other person's being an idiot and he's pointing it out. That's funny. He got some chuckles out of me early on, but like, by around page 200, 250, Jim wore real thin. Thaddeus wore thin immediately because all he does is he goes around saying we're an abomination to the Lord, and he's like got religious zealot speech happening, and that's all he does all the time. And I mean, Jim's annoyed at him the whole book too, so that's what the author wants you to feel, but it's a lot of it. Same thing with Slippery John. The third person stuff is annoying. I got annoyed really quickly. And then his whole thing with like, I'm in love with this adventurer that has the syndrome, so she can't do anything. She's just catatonic effectively. That's really, really tough to swallow.
Yeah, the characters were... it was funny because sometimes I felt like the characters were well written, like the Dreadfucker. God, I just keep...
Yeah, Dreadgrave.
God damn it. I mean, I thought his character, even though he's only there for a hot second, it was like pretty good. And honestly, I'm real torn on Meryl, like real torn, because she's like,
honestly, same.
So she's sort of this overly sunny cheerleader personality, very gung ho, like, we'll fix you right up, and oh my god, we're from the same town. But then, like, pretty well into the book, you discover that it's not that she really wants to befriend Jim because they're from the same hometown. It's because she's an ethno-nationalist, which I actually thought was fucking hilarious. When that was revealed, I was like, holy shit, what a turn. Like, I didn't expect that. I thought that was really great. To have this, this sunny sort of annoyingly cloying character, I think the whole time you're supposed to suspect, oh, she has a crush on him, or this is like a stupid romance thing. But no, she's just an ethno-nationalist and wants to return to their hometown to the former glory. Like, holy shit, this lady's a Nazi. Like, that's all right. I just think that it was an interesting turn I didn't expect, and so I thought that was kind of a fun, interesting inclusion, gave the character some depth and weirdness, and but at the same time,
I did prefer to read Meryl out of all of the characters.
Yeah. But at the same time, like, obviously, like, terrible motivations, but interesting and unexpected. But at the same time, like, the women in this book are really side characters. Like, there's no great representation of any other people. It's just kind of like
Meryl is literally the ditzy pigtailed lady trope, right. And I guess the argument is like, are we playing with that trope because we have the twist at the end, or is it like we're just using that for 90% of the book and then we get the little bit at the end where it reveals the twist? Is like that add the depth?
Yeah. I mean, this just isn't my kind of thing. Like, not only is this something I wouldn't pick up, this just doesn't. I don't want to read snide commentary about how dumb religion is, and, you know, I mean, I'm 35. I already know how dumb religion is. I've already figured that out like a long time ago. This just seems like something for a much younger audience, you know? I
don't know about that. I disagree with that, actually. I think this is for, you know, someone that sees themselves as like the above it all internet commenter. Like, look at all these idiots. I'm the one that like can see them for all of their idiocy.
And that person's like what, 19?
No, that person can totally be like 57.
Yeah,
like, I've seen that person on the internet a whole bunch of times.
Right. That's fair.
So yeah, I don't think it's necessarily an age thing. It's just a sort of like, and that's knowing Yahtzee from his review style and from Jam, that was kind of the thing before too, right? We're kind of moving into like prose and like style
we're
of
still
that thing.
Talking about characters and stuff. I got real bored with this real fast, and again, we just spend so much time on little dinky shit and little side quests. Man, there's just something about, like, look, man, Chris and I love video games. We recently worked on a video game together. Well, technically Chris hired me, but
yes. And,
you know, like, we've play Elden Ring together. That's like one of our other friend things we do. We're big FromSoft stands in this podcast house, in this house. But at the same time, like, I don't want to read a book that's play by play like a video game, because you're
that's not what this is either. Like, it still is a decent novel form. I understand what you mean,
but I
right?
don't want to read about the mechanics. Yeah, I don't want to read about like the NPC and the gold and the quest points. Like, I get that. I agree with you that
you would fucking hate Dungeon Crawler Carl. I know you've been seeing me read through that series. This is a little sidebar here. I don't know why I'm into Dungeon Crawler Carl, Paris. I don't know why I'm compelled to keep reading it, but it's like that turned up to 11. I don't understand.
I'm worried about Chris. I accidentally clicked on one of these books when I was trying to open a TBC book because they're all in the same Kindle account. And it was like 700 pages. And I was like, Chris, no.
I'm on book 5.
This is unacceptable. It is.
I kind of agree. It's a little bit of I don't even understand why I like it. I don't understand.
You could read. Okay. At least read fucking. I know you have it. I mean, I've read them already, but at least read fucking the Jean. What's his last name?
What? What are you talking about? The jeans? Read the jeans?
No, his first name. His first name is Gene. I don't know why I can't remember this fucking author's name right now. Oh, good God. Gene Wolfe. Read fucking Gene Wolfe if you're gonna read anything. You have that in your account.
I will. I also have to catch up on the Mistress of the Art of Death series because Rebecca is like on book 5.
Fuck,
She
she's
finished it.
outpacing all of us.
read 2
this
books.
Sucks. I've only read the first 2.
Yes. She got real sucked in.
That series is good. Although, all right, second one had its problems.
It is.
Second one has problems at the end, but like, y'all have all heard me talk about.
Okay, we can't.
No.
Be doing a mini book
this
review.
This is a good book. Well, all right, y'all. If you've been listening to this show for years, you've heard me talk about The Mistress of the Art of Death by Arianna Franklin. I thought it was just like 1 or 2 books. There's 5. Unfortunately, the author died, which is a huge loss to the writing world, because her shit ruled. But read that series. We've read 2 books so far. I guess Rebecca's ahead of us on book 5. But I don't know. While I have some nits to pick. Really, really, really fantastic character writing. Some stuff that, like I said, some nits to pick, but great stuff. Anyway, back to this fucking bullshit.
Yeah, back to this thing. Okay, so in terms of characters, I think generally we found most people pretty grating pretty shortly. Jim was okay. I got some chuckles at the start. I'm going to say this book did get some, like, that's funny, like, laughs out of me. Like, that's kind of hard to do for us, I think, too. So I want to give credit where credit is due. It's all right.
And, like, sure, I also don't care for institutionalized religion. And, like, there's some things that this author touches on that I'm like, yeah, okay. But getting back to the point we started probably 10 minutes ago, the whole idea that, I don't know, none of the women characters have any agency or anything going. I mean, Meryl has her weird turn, like you said, but she's not really doing much in service to her ethno-nationalist state. She's
exactly.
Just kinda
like it's not like a plot mechanic.
No.
She's just bubbly the whole time, and then you find that out later when she gets a little upset at Jim.
And then the slippery John is presumably assaulting this player character who has a female model. It's revealed to just be a guy, obviously playing the character, but the character got bugged out or whatever and stopped working, and so he's just kind of had this non-rotting corpse that he's just been dragging around, and he married it in a ceremony. And there's just a lot of passages where he's like touching her, like looking at her lustily, and just all these passing jokes about how he's gonna fuck the corpse later. And it's just like, man, this isn't funny.
It's not a corpse, right? Like it's catatonic.
It's a real doll, ostensibly, but he thinks, and everyone around him thinks it's a real woman, which makes it horrifying. I don't know. For me, it would have been one thing to have a passing mention of, Slippery John's real sleazy, like he's actually in love with this, empty character body, and God knows what happens there. That would have been fine, but it came up so much, Chris. It was like every fucking 15 to 20 pages, I feel like we were hearing about him wanting to fuck Dryda, and like, I married Dryda. Oh, we gotta get her over here. I'm Slippery John. And I'm like, I don't need to hear about this much. It's so weird. And then...
Please, Slippery John would never use the pronoun I.
That's true. And then, in terms of just female characters, like Mrs. Sivius is only there because she's married to the boss, and the Jim makes it... I forget if it's Jim or the author.
She's like a shrill harpy, too. Like, she's just heckling Sivius the whole time.
Jim says multiple times, essentially, not in these exact words, but there's very much a direct overtone of, fuck fat chicks. I don't like fat chicks. And I was just like, oh, man, like, can we not do this? It's so unnecessary, and I know that representation in a book isn't necessarily the author endorsing something, but it sure felt that way when you're reading it. It sure feels like you are supposed to identify with Jim, and if Jim doesn't like fat chicks, well then fuck fat chicks, right? Like, that's just kind of the vibe I was getting. It's just, there's not
that, and
I mean, I don't know.
I want to bring
maybe...
up the whole R word thing as well. I don't know if this is the time to bring it up.
Let me finish the point. But then, and then as I'm reading it, I'm sort of wrestling with like, well, was that the whole point? Because games like this, games like this are generally pretty misogynistic and like don't have a focus really on anything but straight white dudes, right? I mean, obviously there are many exceptions to this. Like if you have played,
there's less and less of that now.
But
for
this,
sure.
This was first published 14 years ago. That's a long time in the landscape of entertainment. And of course, now we have the FromSoft pantheon of games. We've got was the one with all the gay people in it that people are mad about. Chris, what's the big?
That's a lot of games now.
Baldur's
actually,
Gate.
Paris. That could be many of them.
And then what's the one with the space aliens? What's that whole suite of games? The Bethesda games, right? I forget.
Mass Effect.
Yeah, Mass Effect. And then there's something else from that studio that's similar, but it's fantasy instead.
Fallout, Starfield.
No,
Skyrim,
fantasy.
Elder Scrolls.
Skyrim and Elder Scrolls. Yeah, there you go. Skyrim. I guess we're coming a ways, but so I was like, but I don't know. I feel like if it was a commentary on that, there would be pushback against those ideas instead of just here is the idea, which feels very much like endorsement instead of here is an idea to push back against, right? Because he does that so much with religion, but then it doesn't happen with anything else when we're talking about, there's no gender politics, there's no racial stuff. I don't know. It's just real, like, it's just real. I don't know.
Not that we need that in every book either, but like if you're going to be doing like a sort of like above it all sarcastic commentary on some things, it like...
Well, it just feels like, oh, I'm a white guy who has a lame life and I want to die, and that's what we're focusing on, I guess.
Yes, that's the perspective I got as well. Yes. Okay, so scoring now the plot and characters here. I'm not going to say -1. I think that's off the table.
I wouldn't say that.
So, I mean,
I don't want to give it a 1, but I feel like I have to, which sucks.
Yeah, I don't know, man. I would say like a light 0 or a light 1 in that respect.
Yeah,
but I'm willing to give it something.
I think it gets a 1 just because he did really think out the whole video game thing, and he did try to weave in some things about existentialism and like the purpose of continuing and I begrudgingly give this a light 1.
Okay, I'll take it. Moving into prose and dialogue here. Okay. So, like I said before, the book got a chuckle out of me a few times, but it started wearing really thin by the midway point. It's mostly about everyone else is so stupid that by that point it stops feeling like you're relating to Jim as being surrounded by idiots and more like you're hanging out with some jerk who doesn't want to give anyone else the time of day because he's so above it all. It's like if Terry Pratchett was way more of an asshole. Right, like it's got Terry Pratchett had some of that stuff in his books, but not the sort of like above it all. I got the right way to kind of think about this, or like I can see everything for the bullshit that it is. It just feels ruder and meaner, like in that vein. Yeah. And there's like this sort of like standard bit that happens through a lot of the scenes. That this could be a lot of different characters doing this, where you have character A who says something, and then the second character says something a little dense or wildly misunderstands what the first person said, or something just off-putting, and there's a beat, and then the character A goes like, you're like he just like says something angrily, like like you're an idiot, like that kind of thing, like that vibe. I'm really being reductive here, but I think, do you agree with me here, Paris, on that?
Yeah, and I mean the author clearly has some kind of talent for writing dialogue, because I do feel like sometimes I was like, okay, I feel like that I could hear that exchange happening. I could see that exchange happening in a video game or even in life between two quippy people. But the fact that it's just constantly happening is a little weird, and that he has to keep inventing scenarios where they can be quippy at each other. And it didn't need to be 414 pages. There were fewer quips. We didn't need all of these. Please.
Especially when a lot of the quips are the same joke. Like the Thaddeus
exactly.
thing and the Slippery John with Dryda thing. Like, that's a lot of it over and over again.
Yeah, we don't. And so this is my other problem with the prose, actually, was that, at first I was like, oh, cool. The author is letting us figure out that this is a video game with clues for people who would understand it. But then halfway through the book, it's like, here's emails and instant messages between employees at the video game studio. And you're just like, God fucking damn it. Like, just give your audience some... that direct, like, on a platter, here you go, here's what's happening, when we can infer that from what you're giving us in the story. I felt like this was just gotta find more ways to get ha-has and quips in, gotta find more ways to get stupid video game people dialogue, and it just was, I don't know, and it's not like it happened once, it kept happening throughout the back half of the book, and that really bothered me. I really don't like when authors feel they need to illustrate things so directly that way. It really sort of takes you out of it, I think. I don't know. The only thing I got out of that, though, Chris, I don't know if I am just so unhinged from my last couple weeks and exhausted that I made this up in my head, but do you think that this Dawn who made this game is the same Dawn from Jam? Because I think it is. And I think this video game might have been what he was trying to get from the Jam.
Like, there's a Yahtzee Croshaw cinematic universe happening here, and we like jump from one thing to the next.
I think so, because wasn't the programmer named Dawn in Jam? Or am I making that up?
Yes.
Yeah, so...
Perhaps he's just like sort of a fill-in character. Like, there's always a Dawn in every story that's a programmer with video games. Some sort of joke that we're not getting.
Maybe. I was like, am I remembering that right? Now I feel like I'm just going to check because okay, yeah, Dawn Sunderland. Yeah, it's the same guy. The same guy was right. All right. I am not crazy. It is the same guy.
We found a crazy link here. Oh, this is like the deep lore between the Yahtzee books.
Well, I just read the name and I was like, Dawn Sunderland, that's the same guy from Jam. And I was like, oh, okay, well, that's kind of clever, I guess. You connected your two books for no reason. Sure. I don't know. I was just like, I guess. Right. I mean, if you want to. I like that kind of thing, generally speaking. Sure. I don't have to like this one, but,
Yeah.
So do we think that Mogworld was the game that he lost in the Jam, or do we think that was Interstellar Bum Pirates or one of the other games?
Simon did Interstellar Bum Pirates, I think.
Oh, maybe you're right. Sorry.
It would be reasonable if it was Mogworld in the Jam story, because like, why else would he be crazy about like protecting the builds and like wanting to get, like, he thinks there's a sentient life on that drive,
right? And doesn't it actually get eaten by the Jam?
Yes.
So that makes the ending of this book extra sad.
Yes.
Oh, all right. Well,
okay.
Anyway, I didn't like how direct the author was about, hey, this is a video game. Like, yeah, we know, we read it. Let people figure it out. Anyway, sorry.
Yeah. So I've queued up a couple of selections for us to read to kind of give the vibe, I think, of the prose and dialogue in this. There's two to pick from here, Paris. Would you like to do one or both, or would you like me to read some?
I feel like I owe you more labor.
Why don't you do the first one and see how we're feeling about the second one after?
Hey, Jim, called Anthony the blacksmith. We found the problem with your cranial press. There was a piece of skull stuck in the screw. You want to take it back now? I'm kind of in a cage right now, Anthony. Ah, so you are, lad. Dreadgrave is gone, yelled Barry, clenching his fists. Rejoice, good people! The Dark Overlord will never again practice his blasphemous necromantic arts in this world! A shocked silence followed his outburst, broken by that unimportant person's voice again. Where'd he go? He didn't go anywhere. He's been annihilated. Angels did it. The White Angels? Said Anthony. Those things that disappear stuff? That's awful, said Mrs. Binglegob. Has anyone told his mother? She'll be inconsolable, the poor dear, said one of Mrs. Binglegob's cohorts. She was so proud when Dreadgrave brought the Doom Fortress and moved out of her loft. She must have boasted it to everyone this side of the river. And who's going to look after his hoard? Said someone else. Oh, we're all that's left, said Merrill. Everyone else got deleted too. What? Even Ramsay? Said Mrs. Binglegob. Afraid so. You poor ducks. If you need anywhere to stay while you find a new overlord. At this point, I became aware of the air gradually rising in temperature and glanced at Barry the Vicar. I'd only seen a face like that once before, when one of my classmates confused his firebolt and water conjuration spells, resulting in his head being inflated with boiling hot steam. Barry's reddened lips were clamped tightly together and his fists were vibrating in sync with his nostrils. Any second now, he would probably either explode or rocket into the sky on a column of flame. What is wrong with you people? He exploded, silencing the rabble. These creatures razed your homes, pillaged your crops, did things to your sheep. Now they've been brought down and the peasantry is free. Who are you calling peasantry? Said Mrs. Binglegob. Yeah, we're lower middle class, cried someone at the back. At least. You want peasants? You can just roll your wagon over to somewhere in Bumbleston. Barry spluttered. I'm from Bumbleston. This, he quickly realized, had been exactly the wrong thing to say. The crowd groaned as a collective. Ugh, that's just typical, said one of the farmers. Some peasant from the sticks comes in here with no idea of anything, trying to tell us how to live. Dreadgrave's horde pillaged us every Saturday after lunch like clockwork, continued Mrs. Binglegob. We all got out in the fresh air for a run around and a good scream. Did us a world of good. And then on Sunday, we'd all get together as a community to rebuild the houses, then have a great big picnic on the green, said Anthony, eyes moistening. Kept our entire construction workforce in employment. My house has been burnt down and rebuilt every week since Dreadgrave set himself up, said Giles the Elder, waving a gnarled walking stick. It's great! I never have to clean the bloody place. But I'll tell you the one bad thing about being near Dreadgrave's fortress, said Mrs. Binglegob, and you could tell from her tone of voice that she was working towards a devastating point. All the adventurers you have to put up with. A grumble of agreement rippled through the crowd. One or two of the shrewder adventurers started fondling their sword hilts. Yeah, bloody adventurers, swanning about like they own the place, mumbled Giles. Knocking on your door at all hours of the day and night, wanting to rummage through your drawers for potions and loose change, said Mrs. Binglegob's friend. Buying up all the best armor, said Anthony, scowling. We had absolutely nothing for ourselves for our last fancy dress party. Don't forget the robes, added Chris the tailor. Bloody wizards buy up all the dressing gowns and everyone freezes half to death come winter, and they always expect me to sew magic essence into the fabric. Stuff makes me sneeze. They hang around the inn all day, drinking all my stock, breaking furniture, and flinging axes at ladies' ponytails because they think it'll impress someone, said Graham the innkeeper. I'm trying to diversify into a family eatery, and here are these Burks smashing up the barroom, yelling for ale and whores. Barry visibly gave up appealing to the populace. Just light the damn fire, he growled. One of the nearby swordsmen was now holding a flaming torch, the sort that spontaneously generates whenever a mob gets big and angry enough, and he obediently threw it onto the hay. Merrill, the priest, and I all scrambled for the corner, trying to occupy the same square foot of cage. A cry of outrage swept over the townsfolk. And now they're picking on Jim and Merrill, cried Mrs. Binglegob. They tortured and killed us, several times, wailed the dwarf from Slippery John's party. Oh, and I suppose two wrongs make a right, do they? Said Mrs. Binglegob, drawing herself to her full height and planting her hands on her broad hips to signal the winning of an argument. Put that silly fire out, she added, as she and several members of the front row advanced forward. One of the confused adventurers did something that he probably wouldn't have done had he had more time to think and consider the possible consequences. He drew his sword.
Okay, so I think that's like a good illustration of the type of humor. It's actually one of my favorite sections in the whole thing in terms of
also,
overall.
How do you read that and not know it's a video game? Why do you need to be told? Also it's very obvious anyway.
Yes, that's how I feel about it as well. But, like, there was the bit that I mentioned, right? Like, Barry's the straight man that is very annoyed and goes, oh, you're all a bunch of idiots.
Yeah.
Like, literally, like, shaking with rage. That's like, Jim does that a whole lot. Barry does that a whole lot. Thaddeus kind of does that at certain points in his zealoty way. So, while overall I did enjoy that section, and Mrs. Bindlegob is kind of a delight to read in that thing, and the joke about, like, oh, it's fun to get raided by the undead every week. I don't have to clean my house anymore. Is like that's the kind of stuff that works. So if the book overall had cut it down so that you get more of that kind of more unique fun gag thing happening and not 50 Slippery John being weird jokes, I think it would have landed a lot better.
Well, but the thing is, like, if you read that passage in a bubble and you're like, oh, this is good, but then you have to read it for 414 pages and it just doesn't, it's just the kind of thing that wears out its welcome pretty quickly, at least for me, and I think for you as well. So yes. Again, our message continues to be this should have just been edited for content and cut down because it was just too long.
Yeah. All right, I've got another passage to read that I think is a good example of things here. All right. I could read it unless you would like to really go for a second passage.
I mean, it's up to you. I feel like I owe you more labor, but if I don't, then I will save my voice.
No, go for it.
Hey, wake up. I gritted my teeth. You'd have thought I'd be able to find some peace and quiet in a sodding oubliette. Who is it? A friend. I doubted that. The only things I counted as anything close to friends were currently scuttling about, laying eggs in my liver. A figure was crouched just outside my cell, dressed in a black cloak with a cowl that concealed most of their features in shadow. Who are you? I trust you don't believe yourself entirely without allies in Lolede City, hissed the newcomer. I'm a friend of the Magic Resistance. They are still very keen to meet you and your associates. A faint, Slippery John-shaped bell rang somewhere in my memories. Oh. Take this. A little yellow shape rolled into the cell. There's a key to your cell inside that skull. You'll have to find your own way around the guards, but keep to the servants' tunnels and you shouldn't have a problem. Good luck. Just one thing, I said. Of course. You're the king, aren't you? A long pause. What on earth makes you think that? You aren't even disguising your voice, and you're still wearing your crown under your hood. He pulled his hood down tighter, and his voice suddenly dropped an octave. I'm a mysterious stranger. That's all you need to know. Oh, come on. You puckered it up and you know it. Man up and move on. Somewhere in the darkness of his hood, two deeper pools of darkness implied flaring nostrils. Do you know who you're talking to? Yes, the king. Another long pause. Shut up! Then he disappeared. I remained where I was, watching the key-filled scone, making no attempt to pick it up. The key represented freedom, but freedom to do what? Get blasted to ashes by Barry or sliced to ribbons by Mr. Wonderful? Failing that, just wander around until every single person in the universe wanted to grind me into paste? At least nothing in this cell was trying to light me on fire. Perhaps for now it would be prudent to stay. Jim? Came Meryl's voice. Who was that? What did he say? I picked up the scone. Just the room service, I replied, tucking it under my mattress. Everything was blessedly peaceful again, and there was still information in my brain to be extracted. Carefully lay my head back, waited 5 minutes for good measure, and finally allowed myself to relax. Hey, said a new voice, as something tweaked my foot again. Long time no see, dead man. I opened my eyes and slowly looked up. Hello, Slippery John. Hi, Slippery John, said Meryl happily. We're in prison. Slippery John sees you've made an enemy of the Adventurers Guild. That was Slippery John's fault. Should probably have known you needed Slippery John around to protect you from them. Slippery John puts his hands up to that one. He did so. Who are they? Asked Meryl. A big guild that organizes adventuring. Well, we figured that out from the name, I muttered. Slippery John means they organize it all. Quest givers register with the guild and pay dues. The guild tells the heroes where to go. Quest givers hand out points. Monsters drop loot. The heroes do the quests and come back to the guild to cash in loot and exchange points. The guild sells the loot back to the monsters. Good scam they've got. They've always been adventurers, of course, but demand for us skyrocketed after the infusion. Why is that? Asked Meryl. Slippery John was clearly relishing a rare chance to sound intelligent. "'Cause monsters don't stay dead, do they? Right after the infusion, Slippery John got a regular gig clearing witch harpies out of a mine up Skitterbridge Way. Nice bunch of girls, actually. Very professional. Never wore any..." He made a motion over his chest with both hands and seemed to go into a trance for a few seconds before shaking himself out of it. "Anyway, long story short, the Adventurers Guild started putting pressure on the mine's owner, so he got sick of the whole business, and Slippery John had to sign up for the adventure trail. The Harpies set up a gentleman's club a few leagues east. Slippery John heard. Slippery John hasn't been, but apparently it's nice if you're into them." "But where did the guild come from?" said Meryl. Slippery John shrugged. "Someone had to look after the money, and the absolute money corrupted absolutely, of course. They're everywhere now, can't move for agents and guild houses. Slippery John heard they're setting up offices in Garathea and Anorexia next year." "Can't someone stop this?" said Meryl pointedly. "What, like a hero?" I snapped. "Anyway," said Slippery John in a sing-song voice, "getting back on track, the whole fugitive thing does add a bit of a spanner in the whole plan with the magic resistance, but Slippery John reckons they won't be too much of a problem. They're only an organized army of ruthless psychotics with limitless resources, but no worries, Slippery John's licked fatter problems than this." A croissant skidded through the bars, and his voice dropped into a whisper. "There's a key to your cell in there. Most people just escape by killing themselves and getting another body outside, but obviously that's, not on your menu. Slippery John can't help you any more than that, because Slippery John suspects he was spotted by every guard in this place on the way here." "There he is!" screamed a gruff voice. "Whoops, gotta go. Meet up with you later." Then he scuttled off, followed closely by a clattering group of armed soldiers in furry hats. "What did he say?" said Meryl from the next cell. "I didn't catch his last bit." I put the croissant next to the scone. "He said to hold tight," I said. "He's going to go off and organize an escape, but it might take some time." "Oh, cool." He also said it's very important that we all be absolutely silent for a while. It's because of reconnaissance or something. "He can count on me." Having ensured that Meryl wouldn't distract me for a while, I folded my arms and waited for the cries of pursuing guardsmen to fade away. Then I laid back, closed my eyes again, clamped my arms around my head, and visualized a badger until I could almost taste it.
Thank you very much, Paris. It was a really good read. Good Slippery John voice, too, I gotta say.
Why am I good at Slippery John? I don't like that I'm good at Slippery John. I don't like that I was like, be a sleaze bag, and I was like, yeah, Slippery John.
Slippery Paris is here to slip into this character. So I think that's a good example of a few things. First of all, how immediately annoying the whole third-person referral by Slippery John is and how frequent it is, too. I mean, that's happening all the time, and I get that's supposed to be, like, you are supposed to be annoyed by Slippery John. On top of that, I actually do like the joke about, like, he gets a scone with a key in it, and then there's a croissant with the key in it after that. Like, later on, there's, like, a third thing. Like, Mr. Wonderful gives him, like, a third key later on, so kind of funny. But then, like, you're also clearly seeing how just annoyed and mean Jim is in general. Like, that's his attitude at all times. Like, he just lies to Meryl about them being able to escape because he just wants some peace and quiet and tries to be like, okay, now we all got to be quiet now, kind of a thing. And he's, you know, Slippery John's actually trying to, like, tell him stuff and let him escape, which is, like, he wants eventually to get deleted, right? I know in this scene, he's just, like, tired of it all and is like taking a chance to have a rest in the prisons, but he doesn't even really add anything or like listen to Slippery John that much aside from like a few pithy remarks during the whole exchange, right? So overall, a nice little microcosm of the feel that you get here. There's some stuff that is funny, but it's a little bit tainted by some repetitive jokes and Jim kind of being an unrelatable asshole.
The whole thing just overstays its welcome, and there's just needless extra turns and things that just don't need to happen. It's the same problem over and over again. All right. What about Tereblo's presence, Chris? What do you think?
Wait, we gotta score that shit first, man. I know you want to like really move along.
0.
Slippery Paris is trying to slip into the next topic.
Slippery Paris is here to slip on over to Tereblo's presence on the tentacles.
Okay. So, prose and dialogue. I don't want to give it a 1 because of how annoying some characters are.
Yeah, and the whole fat shaming and like just general sort of the focus of it is just real bleh. Just 0's fine.
I will say a light 0 though, because there are some funny bits. Like there's some bits that are funny. So I light 0 on this one. It's
actually,
just the
wait a
overstaying
second.
the welcome.
We can't finish this because we didn't talk about the use of the R word in the dialogue.
True. Yes. Yeah.
So
I mean, that was the dialogue. I think was part of what we just discussed, especially with like Slippery John, and you saw Meryl and Jim's character pretty clearly in that scene too. But like it, the R word comes up once, and I'm like, okay, maybe this one character is a bit of a jerk, but that's Jim who first uses it. Then, like, Dubs, the programmer, uses it later, and then Jim uses it a bunch of times. I think Simon uses it at one point as well. It's like at least 5 or 6 times.
Mr. Wonderful. Yeah, there's 5 mentions of it in the text. And again, I know we already talked about this, but like, why in 2010, again, I know it was 14 years ago, but we determined that it was after the point at which this was, even in popular culture, not okay to use. So I'm just really surprised that it, and I think in Jam it was like once, or was it once?
I think it was once.
Maybe.
Once or twice. 5
times in this was a lot. It really...
Yes.
I wasn't expecting it either. That's the other thing is like, I don't know what it... I guess because I was thinking like, oh, we're in like fantasy video game world. It was just a little... It was also strange in that regard to have fantasy video game characters using the R slur.
Yes.
And I was like, oh.
Yeah. It's also, I think, indicative of that attitude of like, I'm smarter than you all, right? Like, you're all a bunch of that. And I'm the one that's smart and like can deliver the sarcastic commentary about it. So yeah, I think that helps put it a little bit more solidly in the 0 category for me, where I want to give it some credit for funniness, but not overcoming the stuff that really put a black mark on it.
Yeah, but okay, I just want to say one more thing about this, because I think a lot of times people don't understand our criticism of stuff like this, where you're using a word that's, a slur, is ableist nonsense or racist or misogynist or something, and like, of course you can depict things in your book, and that does not mean you endorse them, but the use of the R slur in this felt very endorsed because it was like multiple characters both in the game and out, and it's not, and furthermore, like, these characters, the characters that did use it had already, it's like, it's not as though it was being used to show, oh, these characters are backwards, and, it wasn't depicted to be torn down. It was, like you said, the main character, a villain, another character, the programmer, and then like a video game reviewer at the end. So it just really was not a great part of this, and it definitely made me dislike it all the more. So not a good choice.
So now shall we move on to Terriblo's presence here? And there's nothing really that crazy about any of this. Like, once again, Terriblo is present in our lives personally for this round of books, instead of within the books themselves.
Which is worse for us, I feel like.
Yes.
I don't know that I want Terriblo in my life.
When you can put the book down and that part of your life is over, that's right. It's over.
But no, Terriblo's here just causing a bunch of chaos. I'm busier than, I have more things to do than there are hours in a day the last 2 weeks. It's going to be like that for another 2 weeks. So, but then I'm on vacation for 5 days. Hey, that's good. By the time this episode comes out, that vacation will have happened months ago. So I'm not even going to tell you where I'm going. It's because it doesn't matter.
Yeah, fair enough. So that's a 1, right?
Yeah, that's a 1.
Okay. Now, should this exist? Would readers of this genre enjoy this Paris? I think if you want to have an asshole Terry Pratchett kind of vibe, sure.
I think if you spend too much time online, yeah, you'd probably like this. but
this is really an internet commenter's style.
Yeah, this is a really niche style of book. I don't know that. Yeah, I feel like if you played a video game and maybe spend too much time on internet forums and haven't updated your sort of worldview in 14 years, maybe this would be for you. It just
if
feels
you like
dated.
Yahtzee's game review style.
Yeah, it just feels dated, dated and niche. So because I don't know that maybe regular fantasy people would like this. What do you think? I think they might.
There's enough crossover, I think, with people that enjoy fantasy books and know what a video game be and how it works, that
right.
I think that would be fine. It's like, it is a twist on your average fantasy story, I suppose.
Sure. Yeah, it does have some points for originality, although I'm sure that there are older books like this, or even maybe newer books like this, that do this concept as well. I just couldn't think of any off the top of my head, but my head is spinning right now, so I could just be very wrong about that, but it did come across to me as having some uniqueness.
Do we feel as if the author's goal was met? And I would say if the goal was to have a bit of a laugh about the absurdity of living in a video game, sure. My question to you, though, Paris, is would you rather be the player character or the non-player character in a game? I think I'd rather be the very specific kind of NPC that is like the random guy in an out of the way, like the weapon shop owner in an out of the way of town the adventurers shop in once on the way to the cave that takes them to the next story beat. Like no character's hometown or a place where they like recover from being sick for a while. Like you don't want any one of those places. Those might get destroyed by the main villain or something. You want just sort of like the passing by, I've got my nice life here making weapons or armor or magic or whatever I'm doing, and they walk right by you. That's who I'd want to be in a game.
All right, so you're just Kale. Like you've chosen.
Yes.
Yeah, you are.
Yes.
You are a merchant with a donkey. Congratulations.
That's totally fine with me. I'd rather not be diving into like the Elden Ring dungeons and like dodging eagles with sword feet that can breathe fire. Like I'm all set.
Yeah, that is a thing we've encountered. I don't know if I would rather be a player character or a non-player character. That's a good question. It depends on level of sentience and free will in the game and how open the world is. So if I was still able to like kind of have some choices and the world was huge, then I'd be fine being an NPC of some kind. But if I was just an NPC who was like, hello, good day, what kind of book would you like? Hello, good day. Like if I was on repeat forever, I would no, fuck that shit. I need some agency.
Yeah, that would be a hard existence to be trapped in. So yeah, you don't want to be like the guy in Zelda 2 that says I am error in his house and that's just all he is.
No, I do not.
Okay. So I mean, like, I guess the author's goal was met, right? Like that.
I guess I
don't see a missed mark.
I feel like the author's goal was just I don't know, he likes to write and do video game stuff and he wanted to publish something that combined those things. I guess I don't know. Seems like it.
Yeah. Does it add anything new, interesting, or novel? I mean, I guess like that very specific mix that that premise is somewhat. It's a fun twist.
I don't know, but there's something in my brain that's like twitching and telling me that there's something written in the 80s that had the same premise, but I can't remember what it is, or if I'm misremembering. But I feel like there was
I'm sure
book.
some nerd will bring it up in the comments.
Yeah, I feel like there was some book from the 70s or 80s. I'm leaning 80s, but I don't know. I can also like dig through my collection of old paperbacks and see if maybe I actually own this thing I'm trying to think. It's like something on the tip of my mind tongue and I can't quite find it. But yeah, I mean, there was definitely some originality to it. I think in terms, I don't know if I'm like, I don't know that I'm better for it or like I didn't enjoy reading it, but it was more interesting to read this than to read another hero, like regular hero's journey, I guess.
Yes.
This me begrudgingly being like, fine, it was a little different, I guess.
Yeah. did it take something from us? And just time, really. Just the pressure. Like, that's really the main... I think this would have been fine if you cut it down a lot.
Yeah. I think, well, I mean, there were a lot of things we talked about, that needed to change. But the main issue, yes, you are correct. The main issue is it being 414 goddamn pages. I mean, they were quick pages, but if this had been cut to a swift 214 pages, I think it would have accomplished everything it needed to, and it wouldn't have over.
I'm even willing to give it 300.
Oof, I'm not. I just well, it's just because there's just so many things that just were sort of repetitive, didn't need to happen, could have been cut out for content. So yeah, actually, let's talk about, can we fix it? So yeah, I think let's edit this for content.
Wait. Score. You're so slippery, Paris. You want to get out of these topics without scoring them.
Slippery Paris is here.
I'm always trying to hold on to you on one thing.
Lubricated by all this tea I've
Usually
had.
I am the one trying to move to the next one here. You know what? I'm going to stay at Paris. I'll give this a 1 on Should This Exist.
Oh, no. I'm not there. I could take it or leave it. So it's a 0 for me.
Okay. All right. Do we want to come down on a 0.5 here somehow, like the first instance of a 0.5?
Well, wait. What does the rest add up to? And then that'll help us determine.
So technical construction, we got a 1 there. Okay. Plot and characters, we gave it a 1. Prose and dialogue, we gave it a 0. Terrible's presence, we gave it a 1. So we're at 3 out of 5 here. So this could be a 4-pointer.
No, this can't be. I can't allow this. 3 is already too much. It should be a 2.
But the Planet X was a 2, and I feel like this is a little bit better than Planet X.
All right. Then it can be a 3, but 4 is unacceptable. I would.
Okay. I will cede that. I can back that. I feel like a 3 out of 5 is totally reasonable for this kind of thing, which is a pretty good score.
Yeah, in terms of like, all right, can we fix it? If you wouldn't mind, I'd like to go first.
Go ahead.
I'm gonna say it. I think this was a lot better than Jam.
Oh, hard agree on that one. Way better than Jam.
Yeah, Jam was just not my jam, which is the terrible thing I said on that recording too. But it just like, I found that one way more boring and had way too little going on. It was a little too simple.
Less funny.
Yeah, it was not. That one was definitely not as good as that. This one was much better. I'll say that. This one was much better. I didn't enjoy myself. I probably wouldn't recommend it, but it was better than Jam. So in terms of what we could do to still fix it, again, cutting this for content, you didn't need all of these like accessory side quests that they do. I just so not necessary. And I guess if you're making gaming commentary, haha, but it's just not worth the ha-has. The extra 200 pages is not worth it. Slippery John can be sleazy without being a rapist. So can we just do that instead? Can we just make him sleazy and kind of creepy, but he's not actively committing acts throughout the whole book? Like, that'd be great. Just no Arsler. Unnecessary. There's no need for it. It's not serving any purpose other than being just fucking offensive and stupid. Like, it's just inexcusable. The direct platter being handed to the reader of like, by the way, it is a video game. Here are the emails, was just painful. Like, we know
I would have preferred if everything stayed in Game World and like there was the programmer interaction, but it was just only from Jim's perspective.
Right. You know, I agree with you. I think that makes a lot of sense. I don't like the part where they like leave the game into unclear if it was physical space or like storage on the computer that was just made to look like the office. I thought that was really bizarre. It just didn't make a lot of sense. Like, it's fine if they leave the game world, but they're still in the engine, because like that's where everything is in the game, right? Like,
yes.
So yeah, that could have changed. And just, I don't know, the story being focused on like, I'm a 23-year-old guy who doesn't have enough to live for, and I guess I have this girl who follows me and this annoying religious guy. I don't know that I just wanted a different focus and a little bit of a diversity of characters. And like you said, I just sort of wish the characters were easier to empathize with. I just had a little bit of a struggle there too.
Jim especially.
Yeah.
He's just like, he's the kind of guy like you might like hang out with once and like laugh at a couple of things, but then you realize like he's always cutting down other people and you're like, that's enough, man. Like I'm going to be the next target eventually.
Yeah. It's a good way to put it. It doesn't seem great. Yeah. And of course, there's a way to write a main character in a book that is shitty and still make the book interesting. But this book really seemed like it wanted you to identify with Jim. That is how it was structured. And so to have Jim be hard to identify with was a little tough,
yes.
Right? Oh.
Yeah. You said everything that I pretty much wanted to say, except like, let's add a little bit more to Meryl.
Yeah, that was part of my whole, like, I want a little bit more diversity and, like, interesting people and not just, like, 23-year-old gamer who maybe doesn't have a lot to live for. It's like, I don't know.
It's okay, guys. I promise you'll be okay. Yeah, I promise.
You'll be fine.
Okay. In that case, I think we can move to thanking Of the Void, the taco-eating unicorn, for providing us something that was definitely better than jam.
And it was different, so, like, right? We've never read video. We've never read this kind of fantasy video game book. We have done other fantasy video game books,
yes,
but this is different.
Sure. Agreed. So thank you very much for that, Mr. Taco-eating unicorn. So why don't we thank the rest of the patrons now? Thank you to our bad bookworms, Emily, Ben, Renee, Scott H, Donnie, Anya, Lycoris, Jacob, Jared, and Will. Our exacting editors, Rudy Bo Booty, The Ugly One, Emmy, Harry 7, Funny Robot with Antennas, David, Martin S, Kieran D, and Greg. Our loathsome librarians, Yanka of the Void the Taco-eating unicorn, again. Robin, Austin, Patricia, Beast with the Least, Veronica, Luchextina, and Arant. The pesky publishers Julius the Nice Dragon and Miles May, and of course our Ko-fi donors like Kiwi Thing and Martin F. and Brenna, who helped relieve us of terrible books that we have hard copies of that we have read on the show. If you want some terrible books we've read on the show that we have hard copies of, you can buy them over on our Ko-fi page. Will anyone accept the challenge to become an arch-archivist this year? What heinous, monstrous tome will you force us to read?
Thank you, Chris. Before we close out today, I so rarely remember to check on reviews for the show. I remember like twice a year. It's really bad. I should remember to look more often, but it's because most of them are like this one. So on September 1st, 2023, Fred Slacks gave us 2 stars on Apple Podcasts and the review is called Woke. These two think they've got the world figured out, and anyone who thinks differently from them is just uncultured swine. They try to come off as open-minded, but their effort falls short, likely due to the bubble they live in. All right, Fred, fuck off. So put
on some real pants.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't even know what to say to that, other than I don't know what he listened to, and also why 2 stars? You clearly hate us. Why not 1? So I don't know. Did we? That's
generous. Let's give him some credit. He was like, okay, I'm not going to give him 1. There's something here, but they're just so woke that.
Oh wow. Anyway, Fred. Luckily though, on May 1st of last year, Root Beer Cutie wrote us this 5-star review on Apple Podcasts, which is right next to the woke one. So this is a great juxtaposition. A great diptych for our evening. So Root Beer Cutie says, Chris and Paris get me through the day. So for some reason, I really love people who review bad books, and one day I stumbled on this podcast after searching for Growing Around by Mr. Enter on YouTube. Man, that episode just keeps on giving.
That's the one, turns out.
I listened to that episode and was hooked. What I love about Paris and Chris is that they're fair reviewers, giving all the books the same shot and even praising the books when they get something right. They've also been surprised by books as well and admit that. What I really love is the episodes they do with the Antiques Freaks, in which they read the Karnaki short stories. I had never heard of Karnaki until now, and I'm delighted to listen to Chris, Paris, Ken, and Dee act out the stories with extremely over-the-top accents. I can't recommend these guys enough. Aw, thank you, Root Beer Cutie. That was a great review. I'm really sorry we're getting to it literally a year late. I just never look at these because so many of them are like Fred Slacks' review, so I try to just shield myself from the garbage. But sometimes there's something nice. Ooh, there's some other great 1 and 2 stars here. Anyway, there are plenty of 5 stars too. There's just been a lot of bad ones lately. I just think
perhaps you can leave a review for us, as we say on the outro of every episode.
Honestly, it would be really helpful if you could go to Apple Podcasts and give us a review. I would appreciate 4 or even 5 stars, but I'll accept whatever you deem appropriate for the show. Assuming you have actually listened to more than one episode and are not explicitly trying to write reviews against people that, I don't know, you think are
part of the woke mob.
Yeah, right. Anyway.
Okay. Well, Paris, speaking of video games, you mentioned something earlier in the podcast that I might as well bring out, because by the time this episode comes out, there will at least be a demo out for Gobsmacked by Ash and Adams Games. It is a small, mini sort of roguelite first-person shooter-style arena game where you're a little gobbo and you run around trying to, like, break all the trash robots, and you're doing this for blood sports for a gobbo audience, where I did all of the music and some of the sound effects, like the crowds of goblins and the player goblin in particular, voiced by our very own Paris and manipulated horrendously by me to sound more goblin-like.
Yeah, that's me. You get to hear that. If you ever were like, I would like to play a video game that Paris and Chris had a hand in, then you can do that now. It's called Gobsmacked. Again, you can save it on Steam if it's not out already. If it is out by the time this is out, you can buy it on Steam. You can play it. I forget if it's...
There's definitely going to be a demo out. So
is it Windows only?
Yes, it is Windows only.
Okay, it is Windows only through Steam. But yeah, Chris hired me to be the goblin. It wasn't quite that direct. It was more that me and my other best friend who lives with Chris, Triss, were the audience goblins, and we did some like football hooligan goblin stuff that was super fun. And then somehow I was chosen by the Gobbo gods to be the main player goblin. So whenever your character squeals in delight at murder and destruction, or gets hurt, or throws something, or picks up some coins, that's all your girl. It's all me. Get to be me as a goblin. It's very exciting.
So yeah, try out Ash and Adams Gobsmacked.
Yeah. I guess I have...
And hire me to do your music for you, please.
Yes.
Please hire me. Continue to employ me.
I mean, seriously, Chris's website is oselkasound.com. Is that right?
Yes.
Yeah.
All one word, OSELKASOUND.com.
Yeah, I'll put it in the show notes. But seriously, Chris, obviously he does all the work, all the audio work on Terrible Book Club, but he's also done a bunch of audio work for Antiques Freaks. He's, composes original music, like in Gobsmacked the video game. He does sound effects and Foley. I mean, Chris really has all the tools you need. If you need some audio stuff to happen, please hire Chris.
Yeah, you got a movie, you got another podcast, you got a video game, you got your band and you want some takes edited. I could maybe handle that. I can't handle that.
Maybe so, you want to make a wonderful movie,
your
like
ASMR video.
I was going to say, maybe you want to make a wonderful movie like Maradonia. Like maybe you saw Maradonia and you were inspired.
I would love, oh my God, I should
Chris
do a Maradonia rebuild from scratch, the whole movie.
Actually, you would make it exponentially better. So yes, please do that. I guess I was going to say I have a little announcement because I can actually talk about this because by the time this comes out, the album would have been released. This is only for people who are into epic heavy metal or heavy metal at all. So last year I got asked to do vocals on a couple records, and both of these things were dreams of mine to be asked to do, which is crazy that they sort of both happened in the same year. But one of the records is out. It's called Divine Battle by a band called Savage Oath, and if you're into heavy metal, this band is kind of a super group. It's like dudes from Visigoth, Manila Road, and like Magic Circle, Summerland. So it's Brendan Radigan, who's a really fantastic vocalist, one of my faves, and then Lee, one of the guitarists from Visigoth, and a few other people. So I was really, really honored to be asked to do choirs with Lee. So we sang a bunch of crazy choir parts together. I don't know. I think I sang like 42 choir parts or something. It was really crazy and ridiculous. And, you know, luckily Tanner was my producer. Wow, I just realized I've become the trope of a singer marrying a producer. Chris, is it time to just kill me now? Like, just end it?
No. There's a reason that happens a lot.
Yeah,
the help helps.
Unintentional, but anyway, I got to do these choir parts for 2 songs. One of the songs is called "Blood for the King," and the other one is "Divine Battle." So whenever you hear those big, majestic choruses behind Brendan, that's it's me and Lee, and I'm really proud of that. It was a really interesting, fun thing. It took me out of my comfort zone for sure. Because I had to sing in all sorts of different parts and all different ranges of my voice. And I had to do it in a pretty quick timeline. So it was a great exercise, and I'm really proud of it. The album is fucking incredible. If you are into epic heavy metal, again, like Magic Circle or Visigoth or Summerlands or Manila Road, you know, that kind of more traditional stuff, this is it. So please check it out. I would love for people to check it out. I mean, it came out, I'm saying this before it happens, but it came out on March 15th digitally, I think, and then there will be a physical release after that. So hopefully by the time this episode is out, the physical release will have happened. But regardless, I don't know, I'm just really proud of it and really proud of myself for getting a spot on that record, because some of these guys are just like people I always dreamed of working with. Sorry, a little weird and lame, but it's honest. So
no, hey, we're both self-promoting here. We do cool stuff there. I did a video, doing a video game soundtrack was a personal dream of mine as well.
Doing anything, like getting involved in a video game in any way, like whether it was like writing or doing a voice, was also a dream of mine. And like, it's crazy that you got to help me realize that. I mean, it's not like we talked about it. It's not like Chris was like, oh yeah, I'm going to hire Paris. It was just like the developers were the ones who were like, that's the goblin. And I was like, I was born to be a goblin in the post-apocalypse murdering robots. So anyway, check out Gobsmacked, the video game. Check out Savage Oath's record, Divine Battle, to hear me singing some stuff. But yeah, thanks everybody for your support. We appreciate it. And we hope you're also able to pursue your creative endeavors. Being alive is hard, and it can't all be about earning a paycheck and eating food, even though those things are good. Mm-hmm. Please do things in your life that fulfill you, and try again if it doesn't work out. It took me a long fucking time to get to where I am, and I'm not even really anywhere, but it's better than where I was before. So, you know.
True. That's what matters.
Yeah.
All right, Paris. I'm actually, you know what? I'm going to get off this call here, and I'm going to play some video games. That's what I'm going to do.
What are you going to play?
Good old-fashioned sign-off here.
What are you going to play?
Well, Final Fantasy VII Rebirth came out, and my brother and I are kind of like passing the controller back and forth with that, because it's like section 2 out of 3 of like this game that we like both loved together, but like redone and all like expanded and everything.
I have to record vocals for my main band actually, and I'm really, really tired and a little disoriented, so I kind of, I don't know. I might just try for an hour or two and then give up and play Elden Ring.
That's all that counts. Like, honestly, just do the try. And like, if it's not great, you at least figure out what doesn't work later. Yeah.
Hey, you know what also is exciting? I get to see my husband tomorrow after he's been on tour for 3 weeks, and then it's another 3 weeks. So I'm very excited. Very excited. Yeah. Yay.
Slippery Paris is going to have some fun.
No. This is very much like I get to just be backstage and like hang out and stuff, but no, it's work. So he can't even sleep at the house because they have to drive to the next town. So yeah, it's fine. It's fine. He's gonna come home to see the cat, and then we're gonna go. But I'm just excited. You know, you don't see your person, your bud, your main squeeze for 3 weeks. It's a long time.
I would also like to sign off so I could go downstairs and hang out with Rebecca. So
yes.
Goodbye, everybody.
Goodbye. Thank you for listening to another episode of Terrible Book Club. Terrible Book Club is an independent podcast produced by your hosts, Paris and Chris. Sound design and audio editing by Chris, with sound effects and music by Epidemic Sound and sometimes also Chris. Our theme song is Kiss by Yearn, which is, you guessed it, actually also Chris. You can find more of his soothing synthy sounds on Bandcamp at yearn.bandcamp.com. Do you want us to review a book of your choice on the show? Do you want access to some extra audio-visual weirdness? If so, become a patron at patreon.com/terriblebookclub. If you'd like to send us a one-time tip instead, you can do that at ko-fi.com/terriblebookclub. You can also support TBC for free by sharing the show on social media, following our accounts on YouTube, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, or Goodreads, telling your friends about your favorite episode, or by leaving a review on Apple Podcasts, Podchaser, or anywhere else on the internet. To send us book recommendations or your adorable pet photos, send an email to terriblebookclub@gmail.com. Yeah, sorry, I was a little distracted because my cat just did a bunch of catnip and then was like all fucking crazy and zoomy, and he got in his box and started getting tangled in his blanket, and it was very funny. Oh yeah, he's still stuck in there. He can't figure out how to get out of the blanket.
High as hell in there right now.
That's what he does. It's great. He's 19. I'm happy he's as sprightly as he is.